Oh, there we go.
Right. Okay. Well, we will make a start. And first of all, thank you for to everyone for turning up this morning. And obviously, this was an event that we originally planned earlier in the year, face to face in the Maidstone Centre, but obviously because of the pandemic, things have overtaken us, and it's been postponed until today, where we thought, sooner rather than later, we'd at least still have this event, even if it is virtually. And the reason for doing that is because obviously after this event, it could be that when you're thinking about your recruitment and your starts for the autumn, it could be that you look at apprenticeships as a route for new trainees. So first of all, thank you for attending. Many of you, by looking at the attendance list, I know because you already send students to us. But my name's Ian Fidock. I'm the Managing Director of First Intuition Maidstone. Also today, presenting alongside me, I've got Shane Reeves, and he is my apprenticeship manager. So he looks after everything to do with our apprenticeship delivery from First Intuition Maidstone. And I'm also delighted to say that we're joined by Frank Garvey, who is our regional business development manager from the ICAEW, which I'm again sure that all of you have met before. So this presentation, first of all, starts off with a look at First Intuition and apprenticeships, and then that's kind of dovetailed between myself and Shane, and then we'll hand over to Frank with respect to the ICAEW elements of this. So first of all, when it looks at what First Intuition is all about, and it's all about our local focus. Even though we are a national network, very much each individual First Intuition centre makes decisions based on what's best for its local market, for its local clients, and for its students. And so that's very, very important. And what it does allow us to be is agile. So for example, as soon as there was a lockdown in Maidstone, we were able to, say, within a few days, swap from our face-to-face classroom delivery over to using Zoom and virtual classroom, so that we can continue training the students without too much of an interference or an effect on their studies. So that local focus is very, very important. And it means that when we're making decisions, when we're looking at what's right for the location, we're taking into consideration what our local clients and students actually need. And that's something that ticks a big box with Ofsted. Okay. We've had our monitoring visit from Ofsted, and one of the things that they're very impressed with was our intent. What is our intent with our apprenticeship program, and the fact that it's very much thinking about the local market and what clients need locally. Obviously, we're focused on accountancy and tax delivery. That's our core product, if you will. But as things change and develop, First Intuition and us in Maidstone are branching into new areas as well. So for example, later on in this year, we're going to be launching apprenticeships in leadership and management. So there is a link with existing clients, link with apprenticeships, and moving into that new area. And I do see over the coming years that our apprenticeship offering will develop. So moving further than just to say accountancy, leadership and management into digital skills as well. Yesterday, we'd actually been First Intuition in Maidstone for 9 years. So we've now entered into our 10th year. And obviously over that time, we have grown quite considerably. We are now the only independent provider in Maidstone and in Kent outside of local colleges. And with that growth, we have grown our apprenticeship numbers as well. When we started delivering our apprenticeships, it was in association with KTA, Kent Training and Apprenticeships. That was very much under the old frameworks. We are now our own apprenticeship provider, so we get direct funding. And up until fairly recently, we were only able to work with Levy paying employers. But the whole point of this, this presentation today is to show how that's now expanded, and we can also obtain funding for non-Levy employers as well. As I've said, First Intuition itself, in Maidstone, our 10th year we enter into. Before that, and in actual fact, it's 19 years ago when I actually started delivering professional education in Maidstone, and hence why I know lots of you and have known lots of you for quite a few years. Over that time, First Intuition has won numerous awards. We were nominated a couple of years ago as a PQ College of the Year, and recently First Intuition has won some awards for its AAT provision. I talked a few minutes ago about Ofsted and the successful monitoring visit we had literally just weeks before the close down because of the pandemic. And one of the things that they were very impressed with is how we managed our class sizes. So we're actually now starting to double up on our AAT classes so that we keep those numbers down to a manageable level, and also thinking about making sure that the students are getting that contact that they need. So that's why I say we're looking at, say, an average of 15 to 20, but some of those AAT classes we're even doubling up on. So we keep those numbers at a manageable level. Pass rates have always been fantastic. And that is because we have a fantastic group of tutors, very experienced tutors, specialists in their areas, and also supported by fantastic course materials and excellent and always improving online resources as well. So all the support is there, both in and outside of the classroom. So when we're looking at our tutors, the fact that, say, we're able to offer that one-to-one support when it's needed. During this pandemic and during the lockdown that there has been, because the exams in June were cancelled, we introduced a bridging program. So we gave our students very structured guidance on what they should be doing between the end of tuition, which ended, let's say, April time, and now you're looking at September revision courses. So we gave them a very structured program to follow. And we also introduced what were called keeping in touch sessions. So these were regular online tutorials with the students at set intervals where we can catch up with them, have a look at question practice with them, just to make sure they're keeping on top of their studies so they are all well prepared when it comes to September. Next slide, please, Shane. Now, over the years, First Intuition has grown quite considerably. You can see there on the map of the UK, the locations we have. In actual fact, even that map doesn't show the full picture. We have centres in Norwich, centres in Peterborough. We work in association with a business called ICAEW in Manchester. So we do have very much a national network. In actual fact, before the pandemic, we were going to be looking at launching AAT courses ourselves from Canterbury, but that's been, let's say, put on hold for the moment. So it's always a case that First Intuition is growing, and as we grow and the network grows, we're getting good practice, we're getting good quality materials, and as you can see, some of the clients that we work with. In Maidstone, yes, there is Wilkins Kennedy, yes, there is MHA and Preston Reeves, but what's very important for us is the fact that we have what I call a very long tail. We have lots of very, very important clients to us that, say, don't have the big names that you see there, but they're still important. They still get the same high level and high quality service from us. And say that's with commercial and also with our apprenticeship program as well. Thank you, Shane.
Oh, thank you, Ian. So I am Shane and I head up the apprenticeship program here at First Intuition Maidstone, as Ian mentioned earlier. What I'm going to just at a high level and relatively quickly run through today is some of the nitty-gritties and ins and outs of apprenticeships. Conscious we do only have an hour and I can't possibly cover everything in that time. But I'm quite happy if anybody does have any questions to either feel free to shout them out or pop them in the chat box, and I will either answer them as we go or we'll do a bit of a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to start with just in terms of apprenticeship eligibility and who can do an apprenticeship, and some of the myths around age ranges over the years. So you can be any age, up to 99, granted, but ultimately any age to do an apprenticeship. Doesn't have to be related to school leavers, although the majority will be around that school leaver bracket. The key thing when it comes to eligibility, and as one of the boxes on here says, they should have significant development requirements. So every apprentice works towards a set of competencies, and it's important that they're not already competent at the start and that they're not solely going after the technical aspect, that there's room for their softer skill development as well. So as much as age range isn't a problem, it really is that room for development. Some of the other eligibility things on here, as you can see, they need to be in a relevant job role. So if they're doing accounts, they need to be in some form of finance role, and be committed to doing the apprenticeship within the time frame. So I'll come on to durations a little bit later, but it's not just a couple of months, it's a slightly longer term commitment. They do need to have been a citizen of the UK or the EEA for the last 3 years. So just one of the technicalities. We don't come across that very often where it's an issue, but I have seen one or two. So just when thinking about recruitment, if you want to go down the apprenticeship route, it's important that they meet that criteria. And they can't currently be receiving any other government funding. So again, not something we come across often, but they can do an apprenticeship alongside a part-time degree or anything like that. If we look at some of the things in terms of apprenticeships versus exams only, all of the apprentices work towards 2 qualifications, basically. They work towards their apprenticeship qualification. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, we currently offer 3. So the level 3 assistant accountant, the level 4 professional accounting technician, and the level 7 accounting taxation professional. And within that, it incorporates the professional qualification as well. So that's their second qualification. And depending on the level, it would either be the ICAEW qualification or the AAT. But it's important for them to realise that they're working towards both, and that one isn't more important than the other. As I mentioned a minute ago, some of the main differences really are that they're working towards a set of skills and behaviours as well as technical knowledge. So what I'm not going to go into today is too much detail on those skills and behaviours, but I will, following the session, send around a copy of what the government have outlined. But those softer skills are designed to give somebody without wanting to use the cliche, a well-rounded individual in the workplace, somebody that can not only study the technical, but can then apply that competently within the work environment. When doing an apprenticeship, an apprentice does have to complete what they call an endpoint assessment, and that is handled externally by either the AAT or the ICAEW, depending on which professional qualification they're doing. And that endpoint assessment really is just to check that when we say they've done all of their learning and they're competent, that they are. It does sound worse than it is. It isn't an opportunity for them to attempt to catch people out or to start failing people, but it's almost the final check that they are now ready and they've completed, and that when we sign off and you as the employer sign off, that the AAT or ICAEW agree with that as well. And then the final big difference between apprenticeships or doing the standalone qualification is the 20% off the job requirement. And if I'm being honest, this is probably the biggest stumbling block when we have conversations, but a lot of that is because the headline isn't great. The wording around 20% isn't necessarily the best, because it suggests that an apprentice needs to spend 1 day a week away from their desk, which isn't actually the case. What the government have set out with all apprenticeships is that an apprentice has to do 20% of their contracted hours over the duration of their apprenticeship on new learning or development. But that learning or development can occur quite organically within the workplace, and more often than not does. So it doesn't mean that they need to be coming away from their desk, having a day off of study leave, 1 day every week. A lot of what you do, and as it says on the screen, around shadowing, mentoring, and even as they learn new technical tasks that you hand down, will count towards that. So the headline does sound worse, and everything that they do within the centre, so all of their classroom courses count towards that as well, all of the PQ courses. So there is a commitment to ensuring that they get the time to learn and to study, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you need to give them 1 day a week off to go and study at home or anything like that. Some of the biggest pros really of doing things via the apprenticeship route, it's fully supported. So they'll get a dedicated coach, and this can be particularly useful for those around the school leaver or graduate age where they're relatively new to the world of work. They get somebody that helps them just settle in, and it sort of dovetails alongside your own inductions and your own mentoring that you'll do. We provide that coaching as well. It gives you the confidence that the learner can apply what they're studying technically in the workplace. The whole point of an apprenticeship is that it's workplace embedment, that it gets them ready to almost fly solo at the end of it. And that's one of the real perks over an apprenticeship versus exam only. You do have that confidence by the end that they can do this. We find that quite often it helps with staff retention. As companies take on more apprentices, they tend to find they stick with them longer as time progresses. But equally, you can mould them to fit your organisation. If you're taking somebody that's relatively new to the industry or to the world of work, you have that opportunity, I suppose, to let them fit in with your culture, as opposed to somebody that is previously moulded to somebody else's. So that can be quite a perk as well. Just very quickly going to look at the structure of an apprenticeship. And some of you, I appreciate here, may have had apprentices before or may already be familiar with this. But the first stage is what we call the on-programme learning. And this is where the apprentice will be developing towards their knowledge, their skills or their behaviours. And that's where the coaching element comes in. It's where they do their PQ courses. It's where they do their workplace development and their 20% off the job. So anything learning that's related to the apprenticeship they're doing is encompassed within that first phase of the programme. And for level 3 and level 4, that's around 15 months. And at level 7, that is as standard 36 months, but does vary depending on if anybody comes with exemptions. So for example, and Frank will probably touch on this a little bit more later, but people that come to ICAEW with AAT will get some exemptions from the earlier certificate levels. Once an apprentice has completed all of their learning, and it's a three-way sign-off, so ourselves as the training provider, them as the apprentice, and yourselves as the employer will agree that they are competent. They then move on to that endpoint assessment phase, which I touched upon earlier. And again, it does vary slightly per level, but at level 3 or 4, an endpoint assessment would involve a synoptic exam and then a portfolio of evidence and a professional discussion. Or at level 7, it involves a final exam, case study, or a project report. So it does vary slightly by level, but every apprenticeship has an endpoint assessment, basically. And again, that's all fully supported, so we don't throw anybody into a professional discussion. We don't throw anybody into a written report submission without it going through preparation days with ourselves. We give feedback on the project reports, on the portfolios. So we don't send anything off, and we don't just throw anybody into a room and hope for the best with that. Ian, I think I'm going to hand back over to you for this bit on the PQ courses.
Yeah, so obviously if the learner is doing AAT, so level 3 or level 4 of AAT, the way our courses are structured, they're what's called integrated courses. So they do the tuition revision as they go through, leading up to the aim being about 2 weeks or so after completing the course, they're in a position to sit and be successful in the computer-based exam. Whereas if they're doing level 7, so ICAEW, there is the traditional tuition course, and then leading towards either June or December, they then do a revision course, and then they'll sit the exam for that. With both AAT and ICAEW, they get access to online resources. So they are further assessments, their access to recorded lectures for recapping. They get study materials. So with AAT, that study materials produced by us at First Intuition. And because they're AAT students, they'll also get access to the AAT website and additional resources there. With ICAEW, we produce ICAEW material, but they also get the ICAEW study manuals and question banks that the ICAEW produce themselves. Full out-of-hours tutor support. So regardless of whether it's AAT or ICAEW, they get the email addresses, they get the mobile numbers of their tutors. And we always stress, because it's the same, what we're about, it's our USP, that they utilize their tutors. They don't leave it, no matter how small the issue is. They contact us, they send us in questions to look at, send us in their queries, so we can get it ironed out as we go, rather than allowing it to build up and become a bigger problem. And then the course of the mock exams. So particularly with ICAEW and the professional and advanced stage papers, they will get course exams to sit in centre and also privately that they send in through the course. And on the revision course, they do 2 mock exams produced by the Institute as their final preparation. With all of this, reports are fed back to the line managers on attendance, performance in class, performance in those course exams. Did they submit them? Did they submit them on time? How did they perform? And we're very lucky, it's very, very rare indeed, if there are any issues, we don't wait until a report. We would contact the line manager, we'd speak if they're an apprentice to their coach, we'd contact the line manager to talk through the issues, say, rather than leaving it to just receiving a report, and very often that being too late in the day. With our apprenticeships, it's classroom delivery, okay? So our apprentices will do these courses face-to-face in the classroom. Obviously, at the moment, that's being delivered virtually until we are back in the classroom, but that's how we structure our PQ courses. One of the things that Shane said, which is very, very important, is PQ is in the apprenticeship. Yeah, the apprenticeship is the umbrella, the professional qualification is just part of it. And that's very, very important for not only students, but also line managers, employers to remember that the PQ is not the be all and end all. There is the apprenticeship, the skills and behaviours, the off the job, the EPA, the report, the discussion, that's also in there and just as important to achieve that apprenticeship certificate. Thank you, Shane.
Cool, great, thank you, Ian. So that's the PQ aspect of the on-programme learning phase, if you like. Another element of the on-programme learning phase is our impact skills programme. So all apprentices attend 5 skills workshops over the course of their apprenticeship, and these workshops are picked from a bank based on their current areas for development, or so what they need to develop at the start. So we do an initial assessment, we look at where their strengths and their areas for development are, and we focus the skills modules that they would attend based on those areas for development. The purpose of these modules are to start to focus on some of those key skills or behaviours within the standard, and to get the apprentices learning some of the theory, applying it interactively, so they're workshop based, and then being able to take what they've learned and apply that within the workplace, so back at your employer's sites. They're 1 day each, so they're not full long courses. It's a day each over the course of their programme, as I say, and they're split into levels. So as you can, and I'm not going to run through all of them now, I'll send out a fact sheet on it, but as you can see, there's a core level, there's an advanced level, and then there's a professional level. And generally the core level are for those doing a level 3 programme or are new to the world of work. The advanced level is generally for level 4s and 7s. Equally, you can do a mix and match of both. So we don't just throw people onto these courses. It's entirely up to you. As the employer, if you've got preferences, we can discuss those together and look at those that would be most beneficial for your business needs as well. And you can see some of the areas that will be focused on here. So business and commercial awareness, leading yourselves and others, and then at the advanced project management, business risk, problem solving. The professional skills is an additional 2-day course for those on a level 7 programme. So it occurs in their final year, and it's really at that point starting to look at slightly more strategic areas of these skills and how that they can then be used as their career develops. And then just a little bit around the coaching element of our apprenticeships. So all apprentices will have a quarterly progress review, and at those reviews we will ask for the involvement of the line manager or the mentor, just to help in terms of setting of development goals and what that apprentice has been learning over the past 3 months since the last review. You guys know best what your employees are going to be doing over the coming 3 months, and really we want this to be a three-way process so that we're not setting development goals that are completely irrelevant or of no benefit at all to the companies that you're running. So as much as everybody is working towards the same set of knowledge, skills, behaviours, there is flexibility on how they do that, and we very much want to tailor that development to each individual. Our coaches are there to provide support around personal welfare, exam stress, career guidance, general advice on further study as well. They'll be the ones primarily providing most of the support in building up evidence for that endpoint assessment. So if a learner has to complete a portfolio, we'll do that as we go. We won't leave it all till the final month and try and pluck it out in 4 weeks. And they're really a first point of call. So any queries you might have, you can discuss with the coach, any concerns. Likewise, that role's reversed, so that they'll come to yourselves if you've got any concern, if they've got any concerns around potentially the apprentice engagement, or if they're not able to get hold of somebody as well. So they feel quite a varied role, but they really act as a first point of contact for the apprentice and yourselves to answer any queries and to maintain that development. And then we just come on to, in terms of the learner experience, the final bit, which is around that 20%, and probably the one where we get the most questions. And I've had one question ask if there's any clear guidance or examples on the 20% training. And we do have a fact sheet, and there's some on the screen at the moment. I will send that fact sheet around after the session. The difficulty with the 20% off the job training is the government have stipulated the rule, but not stipulated exactly what can and can't be included. So what I'm unable to provide is an exhaustive list, if you like, and I appreciate that would be the easiest option for everybody. The key thing to remember to it, if it's relatable to the apprenticeship they're doing and they can say what they've learned, then it is probably fine to include in 99% of cases. So for example, if they've done a piece of anti-money laundering training at work, that's clearly relevant and they can include that. If they've done health and safety training, that would have no relevance to the apprenticeship, so they wouldn't be able to include that. Some of the headline things that can be included: shadowing and mentoring, observing colleagues, the visiting of other departments. It might be they go out on meetings or they get to go out on audits. They can all be included. Secondments, study leave, if that's part of your company policy. Things that can't be included, it says internal training, but what I mean by that is if you were to cover all of the skills and behaviours with internal training, we have to do the majority of the delivery. But things such as anti-money laundering training and things like that can absolutely be included. If they've got an induction that includes no relevant learning, then that won't be able to be included. But if there is stuff in there that would be relevant to the apprenticeship, so if it's focusing on accounting and some of the key aspects of that, then that can be included. As I mentioned, anything not relevant to the standard, basically, you couldn't include. Progress reviews are one of the quirks of things that can't be included, just because as much as they are beneficial, there's no new learning that's relevant to the apprenticeship standard there, if you like, from a technical capacity. And the biggest thing to remember with all of this is the 20% has to occur within usual working hours. So I would hope that everybody will go away and do some revision in their own time, because if they don't, they're really going to struggle. But they wouldn't be able to include any revision they did of an evening or of a weekend, unless as the employer you allowed them time off in lieu for that. So it will encompass a lot of things. The 20%, pretty much, I've never had any issues with reaching it. The majority of people struggle if they don't log it often enough, because they're trying to then remember what they've done weeks and weeks ago. Most people will do far more than 20% learning, they just won't realise it. So it's not a bigger issue as it sometimes sounds, but there are a few things that just cannot be included, and those are on the list here. The box on the left, and I'm quite happy to send out a copy of the slides afterwards, will give a rough idea of the duration for each level, how many days would be required based on a 35-hour contract, and then how many days of that are made up of the professional qualification, the impact skills program, and then stuff that they would do within the workplace, so activities they'd undertake with yourselves. And this will just give you a bit of a breakdown, so you can see how much is covered by college and then how much is covered within the workplace. One of the things we do up front, so should you decide to take an apprentice on and start somebody, is sit down with you and make a plan for this. So I'm not going to go through the ins and outs again of that today. I will, I'll send this out afterwards, but will help in terms of the creation of that plan at the start. So don't feel you will be on your own with that. My PowerPoint stop working. There we go. And then probably the bit that most people here are interested in is the funding. So one of the key elements is how the apprenticeship funding works. So for non-levy employers, there would be an agreed price up front, and the government has specific funding bands at each level. So at level 3 and level 4, that funding band is £8,000, and at level 7, that funding band is £21,000. None of our courses exceed those funding bands, none of our programs exceed that. And if somebody is on a slightly lower duration or comes with exemptions, then that price will come down. So there will be a bespoke price for each individual agreed with yourselves up front. How the government work the funding is that 95% of that final agreed price they would pay. And then the remaining 5% would be paid by the employer. So if it was an £8,000 programme, the government would pay 95% of that, and yourselves would pay the remaining 5%, so the £400. That 5% is paid for at the start, but the remaining money we get from the government on a monthly basis at even amounts. So we don't receive that entire money up front. It's very much based on somebody completing, and at the end, we actually get the final 20%. They hold it back at the end, just to make sure that people do complete. In terms of what can be funded and what's included within that funding, it's all of the training, all of the materials, the coaching costs, and all of the PQ courses, the endpoint assessment support, the first sitting of the endpoint assessment, and all of the admin costs of the progress reviews, the sign-up meetings, the introduction courses and skills programs, all included within that cost. Things that the government stipulate cannot be included, and the reason they say it cannot be included is, weirdly, the professional qualifications are non-mandatory within the apprenticeship, which I know sounds completely bonkers, because why would you do an accounting apprenticeship and not do the AAT or the ICAEW? But it's just the way the government have set these up. So if a qualification is non-mandatory, things such as exam fees, the registration to the professional body can't be included. And you also cannot include the salary or travel expenses within those funding either. That would be on top. It is worth noting that on that as well, resits of exams aren't being included. Hopefully nobody will need those, but any resits of exams aren't included within the funding. In order to obtain funding as a non-levy employer, the government have very kindly changed the system, which has allowed us to be able to open up what we offer to non-levy employers as well. But you would now set yourselves up on what they call the apprenticeship service. It's a 5-minute job, and it's an area that you can then go on and reserve the funding that you need for any apprentices that you want to take on. So you can reserve the funding, and then you can state what months you expect them to start in and who you would like your training providers to be. We have set ourselves up just to get an idea of what the system's like, and it does only take about 5 minutes. It's not a particularly onerous system. And at the moment, I'm told that funding seems to be plenty. I haven't heard of any people struggling with reserving funding. The government have set a few stipulations in terms of how that funding can be reserved, in that it is limited at the moment to 3 starts per employer, and that's not 3 starts at the same time, that's just 3 starts in general. They have said they will remove that cap, but if I'm being a bit cynical, like everything the government says, it takes far longer than they ever envisage, and I don't yet have a date on or any inclination of when that cap might be lifted, only that they've committed to lifting it. And you can only reserve funding 3 months in advance of their start date. So, for example, if you've got somebody wanting to start in September, you could reserve 3 months prior to September. But if you've got somebody starting in December, you can't yet reserve for December. You'd have to wait until close to the time. And I think the reason that they've done some of that is just to make sure that employers don't go on, reserve funding for 20 apprentices that are starting in 12 months' time, and then there'll be nothing left in the pot. So it's a new system, there's a few teething issues, but on the whole, we've got people using it, it's working well, we've had people start, and there's been no real concerns with that. The final thing, and you can see it at the bottom of the screen, is, and the key thing to note, apprentices cannot be asked to contribute towards the cost of their apprenticeship in any way. So it's just worth noting that when it comes to exam resits or clawbacks. It's not a stipulation we put in place, it's in the funding rules. And as much as they obviously don't audit everybody, they do carry out audits. And it's one of those things they will look at when audits are conducted. Now, we do accept that over the course of programs, people will occasionally leave, or they will require a break in learning. Now, as a training provider, we are judged on our achievement rates of those learners that do complete. And if we have lots that don't complete, the government can take away our ability to deliver apprenticeships. So it is quite important. And Ofsted will inspect us based on it as well. Having said that, we're not naive enough to think that, you know, life does get in the way, and occasionally people go on to find new jobs or need to be let go from companies for whatever reason. And for you guys, it might be worthwhile to know that if they leave within 42 days of their start date, they almost count as a non-starter. So you get any funding you've paid back. And they were never really on the books, for want of a better expression, is how the government treats somebody that leaves within 42 days. Somebody that leaves after that 42-day mark, funding ceases from that date forward. So you wouldn't receive anything back that has been paid. However, assuming that the funding we've received from government exceeds our cost to date, there would be no further cost to you either. So you don't continue to pay funding going forward. As I say, unless there's a shortfall, so say we haven't received any funding from the government, or we've only received 50% of what we've paid out, then the shortfall in those costs would be invoiced. And the final thing is break-in learnings are sometimes needed. So we accept that sometimes people end up on long-term health difficulties or bereavements and things that take them away from work and learning for a long period of time. And there are break-in learnings that can be used in those situations. So it pauses the funding, it pauses the programme, and it adds the time on at the end. Although we stress is those break-in learnings cannot be used for a busy period at work. It has to be a legitimate long-term health concern or bereavement. And the final thing that I'm going to talk about is just in terms of what happens if you do decide you want to sign somebody up. So the first thing to do would just be obviously to let us know, and then we would arrange a meeting with yourselves or the apprentice as well, just to set out the program in detail, create a bespoke program to work out what it is you need within it, create that 20% plan, and check that everybody's happy with what would be involved and agree on a start date. We'd then get all the paperwork completed as well, so we'd go through the online applications and some of the initial assessments. And that would all be done prior to the apprentice starting, which is usually with an introduction day that they get at the start of their programme. They also get access to an e-portfolio system, which at the moment is one file, which allows them to log all of their 20% and keep track of their progress as well. And we provide training on that introduction day. For anybody that may be thinking of recruiting, if you was looking at potentially level 3 or level 4 school leaver, there is a government website called the National Apprenticeship Service, and we can upload vacancies to that to help promote, and that's free of charge. As vacancies come through, we can then just send those across to you to go through your standard recruitment process. But there is a system out there to enable that to happen. And that really very much is the apprenticeships at quite a high level. There is obviously far more nitty gritty to that. But just to give you a bit of an overview today, that is where my bit on apprenticeships comes to an end.
Thank you, Shane. I'm just conscious of time at the moment, so these final 2 slides, which, as I've said, and as Shane has said, he can send you out the slides that we've used today. This first one is just an overview of the AAT syllabus. So in the orange, you've got the level 3, so the advanced diploma, and then in the green, you have got the level 4. What I would say is you can see that on the lower of the 2 green rows, you've got external auditing, personal tax and business tax. Those are the optional units. Traditionally, our students do the 2 tax papers because you only have to choose 2 optional units. However, some of our apprenticeship employers have actually got their learners doing external auditing as well. Now, the reason for that is because those students are moving on to ICAEW, and having done that additional paper here, it gives them a further exemption from the certificate level of ICAEW. We also, although it's not here, we also do offer credit management and control. So there is a 4th optional paper that we do offer as well. But those are the 3 main ones for people in practice. The next slide, please, Shane. And then again, you've got the ICAEW syllabus. The ICAEW syllabus here. Certificate level. One of the things that we're really getting our employers to be thinking about is how quickly they put their students through certificate level. Traditionally, certificate level tends to be completed within the first 6 to 8 months. But what we're looking at is, for some students, that's potentially too intensive. If they're a school leaver or maybe a non-relevant graduate, we're actually finding that employers are actually considering doing certificate level over a 12-month period. It also gives the students a bit of time to get embedded in the working environment, actually, finding out what accountancy is like. Moving on to professional level, so the 6 papers there, of which they would do 2 every 6 months. And then advanced level, now it's not compulsory, but what we do is we very much split case study from corporate reporting and strategic business management. Now, the reason for that is because at the same time they're studying for case study, they also have to put together their level 7 project report. And it's just too onerous to do all 4 of those things at once. So we do recommend, highly recommend, and the good news is lots of our employers are following our recommendation, that the case study is separated and that's sat on its own at the same time they're completing their level 7 project report. Just one final thing before I hand over to Frank, and it's something that that Shane mentioned: the involvement of line managers. That cannot be underestimated, how important it is for line managers to be fully involved in the apprenticeship and what their learners are doing. It's not just a case of just signing off a review form and saying, yep, that's done for another, for another 10 weeks or whatever. They are very much involved in looking at the progress, looking at the tasks that the student is doing, and Ofsted are likely, when they do inspect us and do a full inspection, to actually speak to line managers. Okay, so a line manager has to be fully embedded in the ethos of an apprenticeship for it to work. Okay, so that's really, really important to bear in mind, that commitment on all sides, us as the training provider, the student and the line manager, if it's going to prove to be successful. So thanks very much, Shane, for that. And I'm now going to pass over to Frank.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Shane. First of all, you don't need to adjust your contrast on your computers. I do have a blue bid. Basically, it was going very grey, and my children thought it would be good if I went NHS blue. But I can tell you the whole story about that as and when we meet. So yeah, my role at the ICAEW is very much of a supporting role for both employers and for students. But before I sort of go into the other details about ACA training, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points about apprenticeships. First of all, I have to say, as part of the Institute, there are other training providers out there, but I personally really like working with First Intuition, both in Maidstone and in London. I feel for the organisations represented here today, they are much better prepared for dealing with firms like yours. The other tuition providers, shall I say, they're very much after the really big firms. So I think you'll get a much better experience working with First Intuition. Another couple of things I will just add on the apprenticeship. One, Ian's mentioned about the EPA, and Shane's alluded to that, not being too onerous. I'm pleased to say that actually we've had last year 100% success rate on the level 7 EPA that coincides with the case study. So that that's, I'm not saying it's not important, but it just shows you, with all the support that is available, that students aren't struggling with that. And the other thing about the funding, yes, you have to pay for exam fees and you have to pay for membership fees. And with the 5% top up, it's probably looking at around an investment of about £2,500–3,000. But again, if your student is under the age of 25, you don't have to pay employer national insurance contributions on their salary. So that offsets actually some of the costs you are paying. So, from that point of view, well worth looking into making sure you are getting that money back. So anyway, my contact details are there. So if anyone wants to talk to me after this about more of the details, then I'm more than happy to do it. Could you change slides, Shane, please? Thank you. So what I'm going to cover today is, for those of you who aren't authorised ICAEW training employers, I'll just cover that off quickly. Ian's done a very great job of just overviewing the exams. But again, as many of you know from your training days, it's not just about exams. I'll also show the various routes that you can go through to become an ICAEW member. And then the final part, I'll talk about all of the support that's available. And one of the key things I hear from lots of employers is all about how they recruit staff. So I can talk about some various support that we give there. And then finally, I'll just finish off with, the additional things that ACA students will get, that first of all, many of them will support them with their off-the-job training, but also, things that really can help them in the office for you as employers. So thank you, Shane. So yeah, very quickly, for those of you who aren't authorised, it's a very simple process. What we will have are standards that we want you to adhere to. Effectively, we are looking for you to have a qualified person who, what we call QPRT, qualified person responsible for training, to oversee that student's training. In larger organisations, you can have that person, but then you can have line managers as what we call counsellors. They will then look after the student on a more of a day-to-day basis. And as long as you're going to support the student, give the right practical work experience, they're really the requirements we're looking for an approved training employer. And then the process is very simple. You complete a form, the ICAEW, you know, we all like forms. It is an online form, so, you know, digitally you can send it in to us. That will mean you will then get a visit from one of our training managers who will come down and just make sure that the environment's good for a student, that work experience is all going to be in place, that sort of thing. And really that the student is going to be able to progress onto the higher level skills. So they're not just going to be doing a bookkeeping role for the next 3 years, that sort of thing. And then the final thing is then you get awarded the ATE status, which I know many of you have got, and you have got that for life. So once you've got approved status, it's something that even if you move on to another role or another company, it stays with that company, that employer. Thank you, Shane. So yes, one of the key things is I mentioned it's not just about exams, as you'll remember from your training days. Ian's covered off the exams, but effectively, yeah, students will need to complete all 15 of those exams. Depending on the route they go through, there are exemptions or credits, or what we call credits for learning, prior learning available. And again, more than happy to look at individuals when we talk about this further. But the key things are students need to do a minimum of 450 days of work experience over a training period. The training period must be between 3 and 5 years. Again, I mentioned AAT students. As they're coming through, you can actually register them early so that they can actually count some of their AAT training as part of their work experience towards the ACCA qualification as well. There is also ethics training. As everyone knows, ethics is a really important part of being a qualified accountant these days. So we are investing in, and actually we're just about to launch a new ethics learning program for students who are starting in September. And then professional development. Funny enough, this is one of the areas that actually mirrors quite a bit of the learning applications that are in the apprenticeship. So although they will do it for us, they do still need to do that for the apprenticeship as well. But that's not to stop them using the same examples for both. So that's the ACA in a nutshell. So it's exams, work experience, ethics training, and professional development. So as probably many of you remember, not dissimilar from when you changed, although the structure of the qualification has gone very much more modular than some of you may have done in the past. Shane, thank you. One of the things about the ACA is there are plenty of different routes that students can go through. So be that joining as a school leaver, going through the AAT and then joining the ACA, coming in as a graduate, or even having studied other qualifications. So they might be part qualified with something like the ACCA, for example. But if you want to move them across, they again will get credits for the exams they have completed. So I'll just take you through this little slide first. Ian showed you on our exams map, we have the certificate level. Now that in itself is a level 4 apprenticeship. Students can complete that on its own as a level 4 apprenticeship, and by doing the 12 months work experience, some professional development and some ethics training, could actually stop there and gain a qualification called CFAB and get the designation BFP, which stands for Business Finance Professional. I don't know how many of you are ACA qualified, but actually as members, you can get the BFP designation yourselves, because obviously you've already passed that stage. So if you want some extra letters after your name, drop me an email, I'll send you the link. It's very simple to sign up. Ian, have you signed up for BFP?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, I'll send you the link.
I will. Yeah, more letters the better.
So yeah, we're obviously looking for members to actually sign up for BFP, just so it really gets out there, so people start seeing that designation and realise it's a recognised qualification, and it means that students who stop there actually can walk away with something, but it also gives them lots of access to ICAEW services, things like the helplines, library services, all of those sorts of things. So that's one route through. We've also got, as I say, we've got the level 4 apprenticeship. 2 routes through. You can either go through the AAT, level 3, then level 4, and then move on. Students who do that route will actually get up to 5 exemptions from the certificate level of the ACA, depending which modules they take, as Ian's alluded to, on the final year of the AAT. Or what we're actually seeing is a number of firms, they're taking students through the AAT up to level 3 and then switching them onto a level 4 ACA apprenticeship. So they do the whole of the certificate level at that point, and then move on to the full level 7 apprenticeship after that. Or, as I mentioned, graduates can come in. Generally, most people put those straight on the level 7 apprenticeship in a 3-year training agreement. So they're all the routes through for people who are training. Just also like to mention that we have reopened something called Pathways. So that's a route for qualified accountants. That will include things like ACCA, CIPFA, not CIMA. So if you've got CIMA qualified people, they aren't included in that list. But they can do what we call an examination of experience to become an ICAEW member. So that's really good if you've got other partners in your firms and you're a chartered firm and you want to maintain the status quo of ACA members to others. That can't be done through an apprenticeship, I'm afraid. Thank you, Shane. Just the next few slides, I'll go through these briefly because I'm conscious of time. But effectively, the ICAEW are very aware that we need to support, especially our smaller firms. So over the last 10 years, we have invested quite heavily in people like myself who are there to support you. So I'm there as almost a first point of contact, especially around the training. You know, I will support you as a QPRT, any counsellors, HR staff involved in the training, as well as students. And we're there really to offer lots of advice, be that on, you know, study routes, various routes through the qualification, even recruitment, which I'll come on to as well. And we're there to support the students as well. You'll also have your regional CPD manager. That will be the person who came in to actually award you as a AT status. Again, they come back every 3 or 4 years to do a review meeting just to make sure you're keeping up to date with the standards that we've set. So they are there to support you as well. And then we've got the student societies, student recruitment to support students as well. So I just had a message saying my internet was unstable, so hopefully you can still hear me. Yeah. Yeah, good. Sorry, Shane, do you want to move on to the next screen? So one of the key things that a lot of student employers are telling us at the moment is how difficult it is to find the right, you know, trainees, the right talent to actually start on training agreements. It's something that the Institute has always been there to support employers with. We have something that is free for authorised training employers to use, which is our training vacancy service. And on there, you can look for AAT students or graduates, depending on the level of person you're looking for, and that's all free of charge. You would need to register for the service, but as I say, it's all free. Once you've set up your account, you can update it regularly as and when you need staff. We'll also provide lots of other sort of additional things for that. So there are things like an available student register. That's students who are actually partway through the ICAEW course, who may have had to leave their other employer. A lot of them will be actually big firm students who, with the harsh training policies there, have had their training agreement cancelled. So we keep a register of those students. So if you're looking for someone to come in quickly with some experience, we can supply that register for you. We also have lots of other sort of opportunities to access universities through the training vacancies, but we also do university placements and things like that. From a school leaver point of view, we run the BASE competition, which is aimed at schools, sixth form students. So they actually do a mini case study and work through that. We invite local members to actually be mentors to those schools, and it's a great way of touching with your local schools to support them, but also for the students then to get to know you. And if they are looking for a career in finance and accountancy, you might be able to potentially take them on. Also, we will have work experience toolkits, so you could actually take them on a 2-week work experience placement, and be able to support them that way. And then there's the final thing I will mention: ICAEW Jobs. ICAEW Jobs is actually a free service, again, for our member firms and authorised training employers, so they can access our recruitment site that is aimed at qualified people. So if you are looking for qualified people, let me know. Again, I can help you get that set up, and then you can advertise on there for free. Thank you, Shane. Final thing I was going to mention before we go into some questions is really about the students themselves. So once they are registered, they have a wealth of support from the Institute to help them through the qualification. I will come and do what we call a student induction, where I'll talk to them about all of the resources available, the exam resources, the links that are available to them, also the benefits they get as students. But also we have our student support team who are there on the end of the line. So if the student does get stuck, they've got someone to talk to. I mentioned the exam resources. Not only have the Institute got lots of support for that on our website, but you've also got access to First Intuition. You know, they are the experts in exams. So I would always refer students back to Ian and his team, you know, as the, dare I say, the font of all knowledge on what's going on in our exams. But there are past papers, marking schemes, examiner marking reports, mock exams, everything they would need to do to get through the exams. Lots of magazines and support for students as well. Other key things that you're probably aware of the Institute do, but you might not be aware that students actually get free membership of a faculty, you know, things like the tax faculty, the auditing faculty, and they also get access to the communities free of charge as well. So again, if you've got a student, make sure you're tapping them into them. They might be able to provide you with some of that useful information as well. We also provide to the students a free Excel training course. And this is a really good program to help them really understand Excel to the very high levels. And again, another thing available to members as well as students is the Finance in a Digital World Learning Program. Again, I think, Shane, this will be able to, you know, they could use this as off-the-job training. This is an online program that delves into all of the new technologies that are, you know, really having an impact on finance. So it covers things like artificial intelligence, robotics, data analytics, blockchain, you know, those big subjects that are really now coming into play within the finance world. There's also the free access to the zero cloud accounting. And I think the last point there is the CARBA support. You know, we've all, you know, and that's open to all of the ICAEW family, so members, students, and also their families as well. I think, you know, we've been through some very strange times over the last 3 months, and CARBA have really come to the front there. They've been doing lots of well-being and mindfulness courses, but also during lockdown, they were very quick to act with courses about, you know, working remotely, working from home, but also from an employer point of view. They ran courses on how to manage teams virtually, and they're all going to be on their site. So if you're an ICAEW member, you know, tap into CARBA, because, you know, it's a great asset for you and your colleagues. No, brilliant. That's my whistle tour there, Jane. I think I'm just in time. Have we got time for some questions?
Yeah, absolutely, go for it. So I open the floor, I suppose, to anybody that either wants to unmute themselves to ask either myself, Frank, or Ian a question. Alternatively, I have got the chat box open, so if that's easier, feel free to type any questions into there.
Also, Shane, you might want to bring up the final slide with our contact details, because it could be that obviously there's lots of information to digest. It could be that they have, you know, questions that they want to email us after. So yeah, we have my email address. So ianfidock@fi.co.uk. So if that's say any questions on apprenticeships or just a normal commercial basis for your students and courses, And then you've got Shane, if it's, say, definitely more technical areas and a bit more detail you require on the apprenticeships and the apprenticeship service potentially.
I will be following up, so I appreciate there might not be any questions now, but I'll follow up with the slides and that fact sheet that I promised on the 20%, just so that you've got the information, and I'll include myself, Frank and Ian on that, so that you've got our contact details in one place as well. But if there are no questions, from my point of view, I just want to say thank you very much to everybody that's attended. And thank you, Frank, as well, for joining us today.
No, thank you for setting this up.
Thank you for your time. Oh, there's a question from Julie.
I can answer that. I mean, potentially, yes. I mean, I would recommend if a student's actually started on the apprenticeship, they really have to finish the apprenticeship they're on. So with the AAT, I would say if they've started level 3, complete level 3, then there's a potential of moving over to the CFAB as level 4. If they've already started level 4, I would say let them continue, complete the AAT level 4 apprenticeship, and then look to move them on at that point. Ian, any viewpoint from yourself?
Yeah, I would say that depending on how far through they are, I would complete AAT, because straight away that gives them a highly recognised qualification that they've then got, you know, under their belt, and then move across to ICAEW, finish off the certificate level with any papers they'd have remaining, and then move on using your level 7 through that. So yeah, it does depend on how much of AAT they've done, but if they're well through it, I would finish that and get that qualification under their belt.
But one thing I will just add to that, the CFAB qualification itself, it's obviously part of the ACA, but a separate qualification. There is one requirement that if students don't complete the ACA, they can only gain the CFAB qualification if they do the accounting paper. And the accounting paper is one of the modules that actually AAT get exemptions from. So it really depends if you're thinking about them getting CFAB and the BFP membership at some point, as opposed to getting the AAT qualification. So it's something you might want to consider. But realistically, you know, my view is the AAT is a great grounding especially in the bookkeeping skills, especially level 3 and going on to level 4. So it's really up to you as the employer which way you'd like them to go through.
Any other questions at all?
No worries, Antonio, thank you. As I say, if there are no questions, yeah, thank you everybody for coming, and feel free to leave, I suppose, whenever's good for you. But we'll stay on in case anybody's got any questions that they want to ask.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Malcolm. I'll stop the recording now.
Thank you, Julie. Take care.
Brilliant. Thanks.